So when an athlete leaves school, they go to a college, university, some of them don't study. But the first one is obvious, your support systems. Are you on a bursary? Do you have facilities at your college or university? The second one is the change also from coaches. Now you're at a high school coach, let's say 4 or 5 years. Now you go to a senior coach at university. The training programs are way different. Some of them are different for the simple reason the qualifying standards for senior track and field are super high. Luckily, it's changed now the last 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll get to that one now. So now athletes go from school level to university or college, senior level. The jump in training programs are different. Also, the coaches from school level, they don't communicate with the senior coach. Now, a student gets to university or senior with a brand new program. They're training with a lot of senior athletes. I had it as well. Now you try to catch up also. Remember, we don't have under 23 SHMs anymore. We only have the junior. But all of them would like to make the senior teams. They want to run with the big guys, and eventually they got injured. If you got injured, you don't have a support system. It's a total disaster. So eventually, if your family or you don't have a personal sponsor or a bursary, you're in big trouble. Eventually, you give up. So to get injured is expensive. Medical treatment, physio, massages, dietitian plans, it's an expensive game to make it. But if you make it, okay, the fourth one is more a psychological issue. If I take myself, for example, Sean and Manfred, now I'm a grade 12 learner from grade college in the Free State. I win the essays and I'm get selected for teams. I travel overseas. Now I come to University of Pretoria, for example, to be shocked because there's more athletes. That's also good. They can also run a 48. Some of them can run a 44 on the flat. So somewhere in your mind, you realized in senior level, but I'm not so fast as I thought I am. Or you get fourth at essays, you don't get selected for the varsity sport teams, but somehow the big guy in a smaller, let's call it dam, is not so fast as you thought. And then psychologically your confidence get down, and then eventually you just fade away. For the female athletes, Sean and Manfred, I found that it's maybe an ugly word, but we call it varsity syndrome. So female athletes, they're starting their physiological changes. They put on a kilogram or two. It's freedom. The structures are not so stiff as in high school. You don't have an athletics manager or a coach that monitor your life, eat, sleep, train, study. And now it's free. Now you eat more. All the other athletes or your students are not necessarily elite athletes, and now you get in a system where your discipline is challenged, especially if you're born with a natural talent. If you're natural talent in school, 3-4 weeks of training, you can run a decent, let's call 200 or 400. Now you have to work extra hard to adapt to the senior level. So in short, that's my findings. There's obvious financial factors. You spoke about at the end of last year, early sports specialization. That's also one of the key factors. In summary, become the coaches. I also found that some coaches, they only copy and paste training programs from the internet. That's so wrong. And also our coaches sometimes they're scared to share information. What worked. I through my whole career, I love to share information, what worked for me and what not. And I'll definitely keep doing that. So in a nutshell, that's my aim study.
The person we're speaking to tonight, LJ, was actually quite the example of an athlete that was able to make that transition very well. I interviewed him. I mean, the first time I met LJ was in 2002 after he'd won the world youth champs, wasn't it? Oh no, world junior champs, beg your pardon. And he was still a youth athlete. And I met him with his coach, Linda Foster in Bloemfontein. And a year later, that was in 2002, a year later in 2003, he, still a junior, in lane 8, won the South African senior title against guys like Llewellyn Herbert, Alwyn Meiberg, Ted Villiers, Ocasiliers, and there's one or two others that I'm missing. And these were guys who were world-class athletes. So Aljo was actually a really good example of an athlete who did make that transition. And then we just saw how his career carried on. But there have been a number of athletes, especially on the female side, that you look at them and they're hugely talented, and they hit 18, 19, and then they literally just, they vanish from the scene. And there's a number of reasons for that. And we've also seen it amongst some of the on the male side as well, is that if you know, as a 16, 17-year-old, you're more developed than the rest of your fellow athletes. By the time you hit 18, 19, they've caught up in terms of development, but because they hadn't hit that peak in terms of physical development, they were gradually building up. Whereas that other athletes already hit their peak. And now you've got these kids catching up, and all of a sudden this guy or this girl over here is over there, and there are others over there. And psychologically, that is a big, big issue. So LJ is 100% correct in that the preparation between, from a physical and a psychological point of view, in terms of getting from junior to senior, is a massive, massive problem. And the other issue around that, which I see in particular amongst a lot of the schools, in particular around Pretoria, is that your coach, your head coach, your main coach, whatever you want to call it, who's been hired by the school, his mandate is to make sure that the kids perform well at the school, and the school then gets a good reputation. And what happens after school is irrelevant. They don't care. So you could find, and we have seen, that a lot of very talented athletes get overraced, overtrained, get injuries and so on, because they have to fulfill a school mandate. We're not building athletes for the future. We're literally looking at athletes, okay, what are they going to do at school? And then at the university, what are they doing at university? What happens beyond that? And it's very similar to the NCAAs, where the colleges pull in the athletes, and the athletes are there to promote the college. It's a good name for the college. They get sponsorship, they get money out of it and so on. But after college, it's not our problem. And that's a very big issue that's not just in South Africa, but South Africa really, really is struggling with that.
One of the factors I neglected in the beginning, because obviously you first year or second year at college, university, and you think you know all, but definitely sports psychologists and also senior mentors. I was very fortunate in my career. We had, I see Arnold Malabas also online, the Hestie Klute, Sean Bounds, Llewellyn, learn from them. How did you deal with as a junior champ, and how do you work with defeat or pressure, expectation, all that? So I would say definitely younger athletes from school to senior level. If you have the funds or support, go to a sports psychologist. Actually, we invited now Dr. Henry Gericke, he's now at the Blue Bulls, also to speak to our students about the pandemic. How do you cope with stress? Just remember, a lot of our students are dependent on bursaries. If you don't pass, then there's a possibility that you might lose your bursary. So sports psychologist is a good practice. I would also say work closely with your coach, not only on the track, I think a coach also got a responsibility to also mentor you mentally, and also not one size fits all. The way you work with me is different than you work with Manfred or Sean. It's not one size fits all. As I previously also said, the manager, the club manager, the coach, that triangle must be solid. Especially as you said, the kids from underprivileged areas. For them, how do you say no to them to cancel a race or to sit out this round? The coach, that's also where the coach, his or her experience need to come in and manage the athlete. Nurture the athlete. We spoke about nurturing of our younger talent, and also to get it into the mind of the athlete. But if you are going to the Olympics and make the final and you get a medal at the global champs, then you're going to have funds for the next 3-4 years and feed your whole family. Don't have only a short-term goal. Think with the end in mind. That's always it. And as Manfred just mentioned, it's difficult to say no, but remember, the athlete, in my opinion, always needs to come first. What is the best for the athlete? Not necessarily for the school, the club, whatever. So at the end of the day, the athlete, it's his career, and that's, for me, that must come first.
LJ, it's actually, you touch on something now, the athlete always come first. And let's go back to the fact that these kids are reliant on this bursary to the point of actually feeding themselves. Doesn't that indicate that our entire system is wrong? That shouldn't the end goal be exactly that? The athlete comes first, which means that if I'm a university or a college or a school and so on, I shouldn't be putting pressure on the athlete to be performing and performing and performing and performing, because it gives me as the institution glory. Isn't that where where one of the big problems lies right now?
Yeah, you spoke about systems. In my opinion, there's a lot of holes in our system. For example, in our system, you only get supported if you are in the top 10 or 15 in the world. But to get there, it's costing you almost $1 million. So my opinion, if you're on the top 10 in the world, let's take Akani, for example. I hope you don't mind if I use his name. He's on a support program to prepare for the Olympics. But my question is always, yes, everybody needs the funding and support, but isn't there a younger athlete, the level beyond Akani? Don't they need the support actually more to have a scouting system, let's say the juniors, and then you support with that money a range of Akanis to make sure they go through. Now, yes, it's nice to support only the top 10, but I'm worried about just below them. The top 10, remember, they earn decent money globally. They shoot contracts, etc. But I'm worried about the guys just below them. How they get supported, I don't know. You're referring to the TUT Sports School. It's also a funded program. That's a school that where Clarence's are from, Gift, Sokakana, Zazini. So they're also producing world-class athletes. Also, they get monitors from school level into the university system. But that's why we have 2 athletes in the Olympic team from that school.
Being pro sport it is ironic, exactly what LJ was saying, is that the top guys, and I understand it. I mean, Usain Bolt getting, I think it was $250,000 appearance fee. I could be I could be wrong.
You're right.
Okay, thank you. I mean, he goes to London and he sells out London. He goes, if you go and look at the Rio Olympics and you look at in the athletic stadium, the entire program, there was only one day in which that stadium was packed. And that was when Usain Bolt ran. So he is worth that money that gets paid to him. You can't turn around and say, Because he's at the top, he'll get the endorsements and so on and so forth. He is worth that money. It's how do we make sure that the next generation that's coming through is actually somehow gets a piece of that pie, that they don't fall through the cracks, that they stay in, that they are looked after, that when they are injured and they miss a year. I mean, look at Gift Leoclela. There's a classic example. So Gift has been injured continuously for 3 to 4 years. And at one stage, he almost gave up because he just couldn't get over his back injury. And now he's healed and he ran a 994. But he was able to, because of the TUT Sports School, they were able to keep him in the system. We would have lost him. And now he's probably an integral part of the 4x100 meter relay squad that's going to go to Tokyo for the relay, which is a medal possibility. Mm-hmm. Now imagine if TUKS hadn't been looking after him, he would have been lost.
So one thing this pandemic and limited of races taught me, of us, is let's look at the last 3 months. How many world records, close world records have we seen? If I can take my own career, but let's park that one for now. If I can take Hervé, my wife's career, she actually did this year 3 races. It was the qualification race in Italy, in close to Florence. It was SA Half in Eastern Cape. And the 50K, she was actually supposed to pace, but she completed 3 races and she's in a shape of her life. She had, before these 3 competitions, it was Soweto 2019. She almost went 18 months without 1 race. So now I'm asking myself, and maybe you can tell me, Manfred, don't you think we over race? For one, the rule, you race yourself into shape. Now I'm questioning my own career. I always thought, okay, SAs must be your 4th or 5th race, and then Europe. And so I calculated actually this morning, some years I had 25 finals in a year. 25. And then the Olympics normally was my 20th race, or sometimes as I went older, it was less. But I came actually to the conclusion we're actually racing too much. That can also be linked to our conversation, the topic today, why some of our athletes are not transitioning from school to senior. Look at our school level athletics. They start inter-high or inter whatever, end of January, and then they do, some of them go to the Gauteng Challenge, and then some of them all the way to a global chance. And then 3-4 months, maybe another sport, and then all over again. Some of the competitions start already in October, some of them earlier. So I'm thinking we're racing too much, Manfred.
But you are right. If you do look at the amount of races that happen in the South African season, it's quite a lot. But then you've also got to look at, so you take your wife Yvette, she competes in the longer distances, which means your body does take a lot longer to recover. And that has happened globally. We've had this year off. I mean, just look at what happened from September, October last year in the marathons and beyond. It's been phenomenal. I mean, Joshua Chep, the guy with 2 world records in the 5 and the 10,000. Jacob winning world half marathon champs. Kibubat Kandi breaking the world half marathon record. Valencia, the marathon and the half marathon, the depth was absolutely insane. And that is, I agree, because of the recovery element. I mean, there is the story about the shoes, but that's a complete different conversation right now. There certainly is an element of recovery. You mentioned Yvette having not literally raced for 18 months. That definitely is a big issue. And I do think, you know, especially on the junior level, you know, your body takes a lot of hard knocks. Yes, we you know, in our 20s up to our early 30s, we do recover, you know, quicker than we do in 40s, 50s, and so on. That's normal. But I mean, you ask yourself, LJ, when you were 22, that niggle that you felt when you were 22, compared to that very same niggle when you were 32, how much longer did it take you to recover from that? So Yeah, I mean, those are very valid points about over racing, and how do we manage that structure with the age groups to make sure that A, they enjoy it, and that so that we don't lose them to the sport, and B, that they're actually healthy to be able to compete. It's a challenge.
Series, it was actually first the UPSAs, remember, and then the engines, and actually at that time my shape was actually okay, but it was not okay to be in that shape since March, and then you have a global champs in August. So normally what we did, yeah, we took let's say a recovery week, and then we start going flat out for European season. Remember, in that stage, I was what, 18, 19, 20 years old. Then you get all this invitation. On that days, it was Golden Leagues. Just before the Diamond League started, and is a 20-year-old going to say no for the Rome Golden Gala? No. Or Oslo, or whatever, New York, whatever. So, and then time of World Champs, Olympics, then you are really raced. And then, yeah, it's long, and also the local season, the prize money on that stage was decent. It was not small amounts that you have to raise 10 times just to make a living out of the sport and pay your fees. So the financial impact definitely had an impact on the sport. So you have to raise more just to make a living, and also, yeah, the long seasons. That's definitely an issue.
But LJ, here's the flip side to this, is that the kids back home here in South Africa, they want to see you race here. You talk to Akani, and you talk to Wade, and you talk to you talk to them, and they're like, I remember 2017, the full-up potch scenario, where the athletes turned around and said, we're not going to World Relay Championships. We're staying here. We want to run SA Champs. We owe it to the South Africans to run in South Africa. So the problem now arises is that how do you balance you as an elite athlete, your career, that you're still providing the South Africans with, you can watch them here, not on TV over there and so on, and you can still interact with them. And I think that's a very it's a very fine line, a balancing act, and how you manage that element of coverage.
Yeah, that's a good scenario. We spoke about Isaac Makwala earlier. He liked to race a few times before he get into shape. Then again, as you said, to race locally, fill up ports. We had a full stadium here at the University of Pretoria as well, and also the prize money there was also decent, so the guys also wanted to race here. They don't want to go overseas and earn dollars and euros. But the balance, fortunately, the season, South African season, is a little bit later. If you remember, we had the national champs normally a bit later, not in March as we had it in the past. So then it's more in line with the European season, and then I think it was 2-3 weeks later. Then it's normally the Doha or Shanghai Diamond League, so it's more in line. But you need to pick it really carefully, your season, and also it depends on athlete to athlete. What is that balance? Series, it was actually first the UPSAs, remember, and then the engines, and actually at that time my shape was actually okay, but it was not okay to be in that shape since March, and then you have a global champs in August. So normally what we did, yeah, we took let's say a recovery week, and then we start going flat out for European season. Remember, in that stage, I was what, 18, 19, 20 years old. Then you get all this invitation. On that days, it was Golden Leagues. Just before the Diamond League started, and is a 20-year-old going to say no for the Rome Golden Gala? No. Or Oslo, or whatever, New York, whatever. So, and then time of World Champs, Olympics, then you are really raced. And then, yeah, it's long, and also the local season, the prize money on that stage was decent. It was not small amounts that you have to raise 10 times just to make a living out of the sport and pay your fees. So the financial impacts definitely had an impact on the sport. You have to raise more just to make a living. And also, the long seasons. That's definitely an issue.
But LJ, here's the flip side to this, is that the kids back home here in South Africa, they want to see you race here. You talk to Akani and you talk to Wade and you talk you talk to them, and they're like, remember 2017, the full-up Potch scenario, where the athletes turned around and said, we're not going to World Relay Championships. We're staying here. We want to run SA Champs. We owe it to the South Africans to run in South Africa. So the problem now arises is that how do you balance you as an elite athlete, your career, that you're still providing the South Africans with, you can watch them here, not on TV over there and so on, and you can still interact with them. And I think that's a very it's a very fine line, a balancing act, and how you manage that element of coverage.
Yeah, that's a good scenario. We spoke about Isaac Makwala earlier. He liked to race a few times before he get into shape. Then again, as you said, to race locally, fill our ports. We had a full stadium here at the University of Pretoria as well. And also, the prize money there was also decent, so the guys also wanted to race here. They don't want to go overseas and earn dollars and euros. But the balance, fortunately, the season, South African season, is a little bit later. If you remember, we had the national champs normally a bit later, not in March as we had it in the past. So then it's more in line with the European season, and then I think it was 2-3 weeks later. Then it's normally the Doha or Shanghai Diamond League, so it's more in line. But you need to pick it really carefully, your season, and also it depends on athlete to athlete. What is that balance? Advice will definitely be train and race with the end in mind. Do I want to have a career for 15 years? I think they're both 18, 19 years old, or do they want to destroy themselves before they're 25, actually earlier, and then they disappear into the masses. So pick their races carefully. Stay injury free, of course, always, and also have a good relationship with your coach. Also to do your season planning, count your races, rest, recover. And also, we've seen many juniors, they want to do too much too early. Spread your races at least a week apart. And if there's a niggle or injury, rest, do your recovery, do your rehab, do a proper evaluation, and get back stronger.
It's interesting, sorry, Sean, what LJ was saying on, and for me the key point here is, because how do you hold back an 18-year-old who is full of testosterone, who is eager to go? He's literally just broken through, and he's run fantastic times. Now, how do you hold this guy back and say to him, listen, calm down, take your time, there's a bigger picture, and, there's a longer picture at stake here. And I think that's where the relationship with the coach is absolutely vital, and the coach is almost now these days, and LJ alluded to that very early on, is that they almost need to be mini psychologists, if you would, because they've got to understand how to, it's going to sound terrible, but how to manipulate the mind, that the youngsters don't go, all right, I'm so full of beans, right, I'm going to race, I want to race now, I want to race now, I want to race now, and they become their own worst enemy. And the challenge then is for the coach, how do they hold them back? But then it also comes back to what is the coach's mandate, and those are the the big issues. Is that does the coach have the long-term view that this youngster can become an Olympic champion or just get to an Olympic final, if you will, or is this youngster going to bring my school, who I am getting paid by, glory? And And that's an education process that needs to happen on both fronts. One for the coach, that the coach buys into, and the school, and then of course trying to hold the athlete back.
My advice will definitely be train and race with the end in mind. Do I want to have a career for 15 years? I think they're 18, 19 years old. Or do they want to destroy themselves before they're 25, actually earlier, and then they disappear into the masses? So pick their races carefully. Stay injury-free, of course, always. And also have a good relationship with your coach. Also to do your season planning, count your races, rest, recover. And also, we've seen many juniors, they want to do too much too early. Spread your races at least a week apart. And if there's a niggle or injury, rest, do your recovery, do your rehab, do a proper evaluation, and get back stronger.
It's interesting, sorry, Sean, what LJ was saying on, and for me the key point here is, because how do you hold back an 18-year-old who is full of testosterone, who is eager to go? He's literally just broken through, and he's run fantastic times. Now, how do you hold this guy back and say to him, listen, calm down, take your time, there's a bigger picture, there's a longer picture at stake here. And I think that's where the relationship with the coach is absolutely vital. And the coaches almost now these days, and LJ alluded to that very early on, is that they almost need to be mini psychologists, if you would, because they've got to understand how to, it's going to sound terrible, but how to manipulate the mind, that the youngsters don't go, all right, I'm so full of beans, right, I'm going to race, I want to race now, I want to race now, I want to race now, and they become their own worst enemy. And the challenge then is for the coach, how do they hold them back? But then it also comes back to what is the coach's mandate, and those are the big issues. Is that does the coach have the long-term view that this youngster can become an Olympic champion or just get to an Olympic final, if you will, or is this youngster going to bring my school, who I am getting paid by, glory? And that's an education process that needs to happen on both fronts. One for the coach, that the coach buys into, and the school, and then of course trying to hold the athlete back. And I think there's a conversation, there's a broader conversation that needs to happen, that it's not university, whether it's TUKS or University of Friesau or whatever, that needs to be looking at, okay, they're looking very insular, and so are the schools. But where does it start? Is the federation, is the mother body not responsible to turn around and say, okay, how do we grow the sport? Let's look at the sport as a whole and see, where does schools fit in? Where do universities fit in? Where do colleges fit in? And what happens beyond that? And for that to happen, it basically means that the National Federation will have to sit down with those different bodies and work out a strategy and a plan. And we've been talking about this since readmission, that preparing for an Olympics is an 8-year cycle. If you're a SASCOC or an Athletics South Africa or Swimming South Africa, it's an 8-year cycle. And that same principle applies to high school athletes going into college, university, and beyond that. I think it needs to start with the federation turning around and saying to those bodies, okay, how do we make this work? Because in the bigger picture is that, as you quite rightly say, you have an Olympian at your school or at your university. That should be a big draw card. But how do we get more of those? And right now, we've got schools sitting over here, and we've got universities over there, and Athletics South Africa over there, and the dots aren't connected, and that's a problem. The biggest problem, of course, and let's start at schools and so on, at what point do you start specializing? And that's always been a big debate. Are you specializing at 15, or are you still playing at 15? And of course, the schools in South Africa, athletics is a summer sport, and it's only 4 weeks. That's the problem. It is only 4 weeks. So that means February school athletics is done. Then you start going into another sport, and then it's winter, which is rugby or hockey or whatever you want to do, or netball in the woman in the girls' case. And then come the end of the year, you start prepping, hopefully, for for next year's 4-week athletic season. So, yeah, I think on a school level, again, the question is when do you start specializing? And at the age of 11, 12, and so on, you do want the kids to be playing. You want them to be exposed to as much as they possibly can. And there it's more about learning human movement skills, coordination, and why exercise is good for you. And then only much later do you start specializing.
I'm doing a second master's degree at the German Sports University in Cologne. So now I'm looking at dual career perceptions of Olympic athletes at higher education institutions. So I'm looking at how is it possible, or how can elite athletes or Olympians still do a second career for one day, the post-retirement? Are they able to ride the 2 horses simultaneously, or will they complete the high performance career and then start to study? That's almost not impossible, but that's a difficult route. So the ideal situation is for athletes to still study and eventually do your postgrad, stay in the system of a university, a college, make the benefit out of it. And also, by the way, in my 3 of my students are down the Olympic team for Tokyo, and I had conversations with them, and they love to study because they feel it's something else just to take your mind off the track. Fortunately, our curriculum is now a blend, or is more online because of the pandemic, and it seems like they love it because all the sessions, the same as this one, are recorded. They can listen to it afterwards. Extended deadlines, especially the guys that's going now to Tokyo. And so I'm looking at dual career perceptions and how can we improve our system in higher education in South Africa. Not only University of Pretoria where I work, but right across. Also that post-retirement. I think, Manfred, you can agree with me on this one. Post-retirement is not easy. Your identity is a bit lost. I went through it, but fortunately I did study 3 degrees. I'm doing my 4th one now, and for me, I actually love it at the moment. I like to make a difference and a contribution then that other athletes, not only athletics, can learn out of my mistakes and also my best practices. One of my best decisions is to keep studying and keep my mind off not only family, not only working. So that's one of my, I will say, weapons throughout my career. I did study and I like it at the moment. That's my contribution to make it a better situation for the next generation.